Sometimes, life teaches you the meaning of love not through people, but through silence, betrayal, and a loyalty that comes from unexpected places. I once believed love could fix everything. That if you gave your heart, your time, your world, someone would stay. But people don't always love you for who you are. They love you for what you can give. I gave my heart, and it was broken. I gave my trust, and it was betrayed. I gave everything I had, and they still left. And when everyone was gone, when the noise of promises turned into the silence of loneliness, someone came to me, not with words, not with lies, but with honest eyes and quiet loyalty. He didn't want money. He didn't want love. He just wanted to stay. That night, I learned something I'll never forget. Sometimes it's better to keep a dog than to fall in love. I was 17 when I first confused infatuation with forever. Back then, everything felt new, raw, and endless. Every word, every touch, every promise carried the weight of a lifetime. I still remember that autumn evening, the smell of wet streets after rain, the chatter of students leaving class. The first time I saw her standing under a flickering streetlight. Her name was Ria. She wore her school uniform slightly loose, the collar open just enough to let the wind breathe through. She was reading a book, smiling at something only she could see. For a moment, I forgot the world existed. I walked past her twice, pretending to check my phone. On the third try, I spoke. "Hey, that's a good book." She looked up, smiled, and said, "You've read it?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm planning to." That was how it began. Not with fireworks, just two strangers sharing small talk under a dim light. Days turned into routines. I waited for her bus to arrive every morning, and she began waiting for mine every afternoon. We talked about movies, exams, and things we didn't yet understand. The kind of conversations that make you believe the world is soft. I wrote her letters I never sent. I drew her name in the last pages of my notebooks. When she laughed, it felt like sunlight after winter. When she cried, it felt like the sky had broken. I saved my pocket money to buy her little gifts. A bracelet, a pen, a paperback novel. She'd always say, "You didn't have to." And I'd always whisper back, "I wanted to." There was a kind of purity in it. The kind only young hearts know. Love without calculation, without fear, without a future plan. But time, cruel and predictable, always demands payment for innocence. When college ended, her father got a transfer to another city. We promised to keep in touch. Promised that distance wouldn't change us. For a while, it didn't. We called each other every night. We texted until sleep dragged us away. Then the calls became shorter. Then the replies came slower. And one day, silence arrived. Quiet, unapologetic, permanent. I remember staring at my phone screen long after her last message. It said, "Take care." No punctuation, no explanation, just an ending dressed as politeness. Weeks passed. Then months. I told myself she was busy, that she'd come back. She didn't. I learned how absence becomes a ghost. You stop seeing the person, but they still haunt every street, every song, every moment you once shared. I kept her bracelet in my drawer, the one I'd given her. Some nights I took it out just to remember the weight of belief. Love, I realized, doesn't die all at once. It fades slowly, like a photograph left too long in sunlight. By 20, I was older, but not wiser. Friends said, "Move on." But how do you move on from a version of yourself that only existed because of someone else? I smiled, laughed, worked, lived. But a part of me stayed back in that small town, under that streetlight, watching a girl read a book and smile at a secret I'd never know. That was my first heartbreak. Gentle, devastating, necessary. It taught me that love is not always meant to last. Sometimes it's only meant to teach you how to lose without bitterness. I didn't know it then, but that first loss prepared me for everything that came later. For the love that would take everything I owned, for the betrayal that would carve its lesson into my soul, and for the quiet companion who would one day teach me what loyalty truly means. Years passed quietly after Ria. I buried myself in work, in responsibilities that never cared whether I was happy or not. The city had changed. I had changed. The boy who once believed in forever had learned to survive on temporary moments. I lived alone in a small apartment in downtown Chicago. The nights there were different. Not silent, but filled with the hum of traffic and the faint echo of music from strangers' windows. Sometimes, when the rain fell against the glass, it felt like the city itself was crying for everyone who'd lost someone. My father had died when I was a child. My mother had followed a few years later. Their inheritance became mine before I was even old enough to understand what money meant. I didn't value it. Maybe that's why I gave it away so easily later, thinking love could be bought, thinking loyalty had a price tag. I met Alina in a coffee shop near the Riverwalk. She wasn't like Ria. She was confident, magnetic, and bold in a way that made everyone turn when she entered a room. She smiled like she knew exactly what she wanted from life, and maybe from me. We talked about books and movies, but mostly about ambitions. She said she wanted to build something big, to never depend on anyone. I admired that. She admired my calmness, or at least she said she did. Within months, we were inseparable. She moved in with me, said her old apartment felt too empty. The way she said it made me feel needed again. And I wanted to be needed. She loved fancy restaurants, designer perfumes, weekend trips, and champagne by the lake. I wasn't used to that kind of life, but watching her eyes light up when I said yes made me feel powerful and foolishly in love. She once told me, "You make me feel like I deserve the world." I didn't realize that meant she wanted to own it. I bought her a car, her favorite, a sleek black convertible. Then an apartment in her name, just in case something happens. She called me her blessing, her luck, her everything. I thought it was love. It wasn't. It was a transaction I didn't know I was making. One Friday evening, she came home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, wearing a smile that wasn't mine. I asked where she'd been. She said, "Out with friends." I wanted to believe her, so I did. For months, the distance grew, invisible at first, then undeniable. Her laughter changed tone. Her eyes avoided mine. Our home started to feel like a hotel room I was renting by the day. Then one morning I woke up and she was gone. Her clothes, her laptop, her keys, everything vanished. The only thing she left was a short text. "I'm sorry. Please don't call." I froze. I called anyway. The number was disconnected. 2 weeks later, I saw a photo online. Her wedding. She was smiling beside another man. Older, wealthier, successful. The caption read, "Forever begins today." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the pain had gone past words. All the gifts, the car, the apartment. Everything was hers now. My lawyer said I couldn't take them back. "Love isn't a legal contract," he said. I just nodded. He didn't know how right he was. The nights that followed were long and heavy. I stopped meeting people. I stopped answering messages. The sound of my own breathing became unbearable. It's strange how heartbreak feels physical. Like your ribs are too tight. Your lungs too small. And no amount of air can make you feel alive again. I used to sit by the window with a drink in my hand, watching the rain blur the city lights. Every drop sounded like the echo of her goodbye. Every shadow looked like her leaving. That's when I started talking to myself. Not out loud, just in thoughts. Maybe this is what I deserve. Maybe love isn't real after all. maybe I'm the problem. But the truth was simpler. I had loved the wrong kind of people in the right kind of way. Weeks passed. One cold night I heard scratching at my door. At first I ignored it, thought it was the wind. Then I heard it again. When I opened the door, I saw him. A stray dog, drenched in rain, shivering, eyes dull but kind. He didn't move, didn't bark. He just looked at me. I don't know why, but I stepped aside. He walked in, shaking water across my floor. I gave him a towel, some leftover food, and a name, Max. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in months. In the mornings, Max would wait by my chair while I read the paper. He'd follow me around, tail wagging, eyes always soft, forgiving. When I worked late, he'd sit beside my feet until I shut down the laptop. When I cried, yes, I did, he'd put his head on my knee, silent but steady. He never asked for anything. Not gifts, not promises, not explanations. He was just there. And for the first time, someone's presence didn't feel conditional. I learned something profound from him. That love doesn't have to speak to be felt. That loyalty doesn't come from fear or need, but from connection, simple, pure, and silent. I used to laugh when people said, "Dogs are more loyal than humans." Now I knew it was true. One evening, as the rain fell softly outside, I whispered to him, "You know, Max, people lied when they said I wasn't worth loving." He tilted his head and rested it on my arm, as if to say, "I know you are." That small gesture broke me open in a way no heartbreak ever did. Tears fell quietly, not of pain, but of release. That's the night I said to myself, it's better to keep a dog than to fall in love. And for the first time, it didn't sound bitter. It sounded like peace. The winter that followed was cruel. The kind that bites through gloves and settles deep in the bones. But for the first time, I didn't mind the cold. Max was there. A heartbeat that followed me around the apartment. His quiet companionship louder than any conversation I'd ever had. Mornings started with him. He'd sit by the door, waiting for me to lace my boots. When I opened it, he'd rush into the snow like a child seeing the world for the first time. I'd watch him run, his paws leaving small, perfect prints that vanished in minutes. There was something beautiful about how he never looked back, yet always found his way home. Life became simpler. Work, walk, feed Max, sleep. The chaos that once lived inside me began to fade. Loneliness didn't feel like a curse anymore. It felt like clarity. At night, I'd sit by the window with Max at my feet, staring at the same city that once felt like a stranger. Now it felt smaller, quieter, almost kind. People at work noticed the change. "You seem lighter," someone said once. Maybe they were right, because I'd stopped expecting happiness to come from anyone else. One Sunday morning, I took Max to the park. He ran ahead, chasing pigeons and the laughter of children. I sat on a bench, coffee in hand, watching families, couples, friends, all the lives I used to envy. But that morning, I didn't feel left out. I felt free. A woman sat beside me, maybe in her 30s. She smiled at Max, who immediately trotted over and rested his head on her knee. "He's beautiful," she said. "Yeah," I smiled. "He found me," she laughed softly. "Isn't it supposed to be the other way around?" "Maybe," I said, "but I think he chose better." We talked for a while. Her name was Emma. She was a writer, the quiet kind, always observing, collecting stories she'd never tell. There was something familiar about her calmness, something that didn't demand, didn't chase. She didn't ask about my past, and I didn't ask about hers. We just talked, about books, about coffee, about why winter makes people nostalgic. When we left, she said, "See you next Sunday?" I nodded. It wasn't love, and not yet. It was something softer, slower, like friendship testing the temperature of trust. Weeks passed, and Emma became part of my small, quiet world. She'd join Max and me on walks, sometimes bringing a ball or his favorite biscuits. Max adored her instantly. Maybe he sensed what I couldn't admit, that her presence didn't stir chaos inside me. It brought calm. One evening, after a walk, we stopped at my building. She looked up at the sky and said, "You know, you smile differently when you're with him." "With who?" "Max," I laughed. "He's my best friend." She smiled back, eyes soft. "Then you're lucky. Most people spend their whole lives looking for that kind of friend." That night, her words echoed in my head. Most people chase love that consumes them. I'd found love that steadied me. Months turned into a year. Emma stayed, not every day, not all at once, but steadily. Sometimes she'd bring dinner. Sometimes we'd sit on the balcony in silence, watching the rain slide down the glass. Max would curl up beside us, a silent witness to our unspoken comfort. One night, Emma asked, "Do you ever get angry about what they did to you?" I paused. "Sometimes. But not as much anymore." "Why not?" "Because Max taught me something." She smiled. "What's that?" "That loyalty doesn't come from promises. It comes from presence." She nodded, eyes glistening in the dim light. "I think that's beautiful," she whispered. Years have a way of softening the edges of pain. Max grew older, slower. The once playful jumps turned into gentle walks. His fur began to gray, his eyes clouded, but his loyalty never changed. When he slept beside me, I could hear his soft breathing, steady, rhythmic, like a lullaby written by time itself. Every breath reminded me that love doesn't need to last forever to be real. Sometimes it just needs to stay long enough to change you. Then came the night I feared most. It was raining, softly, the way it always did when my life shifted. Max wasn't eating. He lay beside my bed, head resting on his paws, eyes tired but peaceful. I sat there, stroking his fur, whispering stories he'd heard 1,000 times. "Hey, buddy," I said, voice trembling. "Remember the night you walked into my life?" His tail moved once weakly. "You saved me, Max. You really did." He looked at me, that same gaze from years ago, then closed his eyes. And just like that, he was gone. The silence that followed was unbearable. For weeks I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind felt like him coming back. But grief, I learned, is just love with nowhere to go. One evening I went back to the park. The bench was empty. The air was cold. I sat down, closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, my friend. You taught me how to love without fear." A few tears fell, mixing with the drizzle. I didn't wipe them away. When I opened my eyes, the city lights shimmered through the mist. And for a second, I could almost see him running again, free, happy, whole. Later that night, Emma called. Her voice was soft. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "He's gone." She didn't speak for a moment. Then she whispered, "He'd be proud of you." I smiled through the ache. "Maybe, not maybe," she said. "He taught you to stay." And in that silence, I realized she was right. Max had left, but he'd left me capable of love again. Not the kind that hurts, but the kind that heals. From that day, I started writing about pain, loyalty, love, and the simple truth that saved me. It's better to keep a dog than to fall in love, because sometimes the most honest hearts don't speak in words. They just stay, quietly, faithfully, forever. The years moved like slow rivers, quiet, steady, and filled with reflections of everything I had lost and everything I had found. It's strange how life circles back to the simplest things. Mornings that start with black coffee, evenings that end with soft rain, and memories that visit not to hurt you, but to remind you that you survived. Chicago felt different now. The noise didn't bother me anymore. The same streets that once echoed with heartbreak now hummed with familiarity, like an old song I had finally learned to love again. Emma was still here. She never tried to replace the space Max left behind. She just filled it with kindness, small things, folded notes on the counter, a warm meal when I forgot to eat, laughter that felt like sunlight. Sometimes we'd walk together in the park, passing the bench where Max and I used to sit. I'd still glance at that spot out of habit, half expecting to see him waiting, tail wagging. Emma never said anything. She just held my hand. There was one morning that felt different from all others. The sky was heavy with clouds, but the light breaking through them was soft, golden, like forgiveness. I was sitting on the balcony, sipping my coffee, when Emma walked out holding a small puppy in her arms. "Meet Charlie," she said, smiling. For a moment, I froze. The tiny dog blinked up at me, tail twitching nervously. Something inside my chest stirred. Pain, joy, memory, all tangled into one breath. "I thought maybe," she said quietly, "you could teach him the things Max taught you." I looked at her, at the puppy, at the world that had taken so much, and still somehow found ways to give again. And for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of beginning, not loss. Charlie wasn't Max. He didn't have to be. He was something new, a heartbeat that reminded me that love doesn't end. It transforms. That evening, as rain began to fall, I sat by the window again, the same window where once I'd stared at my own emptiness. Now the reflection was different. There was Emma behind me, humming softly, and Charlie asleep beside my feet. The rain wasn't sorrow anymore. It was rhythm. I thought about my past, about Ria's smile, Alina's betrayal, Max's quiet loyalty. Each had left something behind, a scar, a lesson, a piece of peace. Pain doesn't vanish. It becomes part of the architecture of your soul, shaping you, softening you, teaching you how to hold love without crushing it. Years later, I wrote a book. Not about heartbreak, but about healing, about finding comfort in simple things, about a man who lost everything and found himself again in the reflection of a dog's eyes. I didn't expect anyone to read it. But they did. Letters started arriving. People saying, "I thought I was alone until I read your story." And I realized that maybe my pain had served a purpose after all. One rainy night, Emma and I sat on the couch, a fire flickering nearby. Charlie was curled up between us, dreaming. She asked, "Do you ever miss them?" "The ones before?" I took a long breath. "Sometimes, but I don't hate them anymore." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because they were the chapters that led me here." She smiled. "Do you ever think you'll fall in love again?" I looked at her patience, her warmth, her quiet presence. And I said, maybe I already did. Outside, the rain grew heavier, tapping softly on the window. The same sound that had once been my grief now sounded like a song of return. I whispered, more to myself than to her, people leave, hearts break, but somehow love always finds its way back, in a different form, through a different soul, maybe even through a wagging tail. Emma leaned closer. "And when it does?" I smiled. "You let it stay." That night, before I fell asleep, I glanced at the small photo frame on my bedside table. It held a picture of Max, his eyes gentle, timeless. Beside it was another photo, this one new. Emma laughing, Charlie mid-jump, a frozen moment of joy. The rain whispered against the glass, soft and steady. I closed my eyes and let it carry me into dreams not of loss, but of peace. Because after everything, I finally understood. Loneliness was never my punishment. It was my teacher, and love was never gone. It had just been waiting for me to be ready again.